Where there is Metroid news, you know that I will be here to break it down. That's right, it has been quite a while since we've had any sort of actual news or updates about Metroid Prime 4 to talk about, but luckily that's what we have to do today. There's actually been another hiring update, and I understand that hiring updates aren't really the most exciting or the most significant news or updates about the development of a game. But when it comes to Metroid Prime 4, it's kind of all we have to go on at this point, right? I mean, what else can we talk about? These hirings keep happening. They give us slight glimpses into what might be happening behind the scenes. This is the game of all games that I've been waiting for forever, and so yeah, I'm going to talk about it. You guys come here to hear me talk about Metroid, and so this is the news there is. Now, before I dive deep into this Metroid news, I do want to remind you that I'm currently pushing to cross 15,000 subscribers before the end of the year. I am very, very close, so as you watch this video, if you like what I'm doing, then maybe consider subscribing to the channel to help me cross that milestone before the year is over. So, another day, another Metroid Prime 4 hiring update. I know, like I said at the beginning, it's kind of silly that this is all we have to talk about, but this is all we have to talk about. It can't be denied. It's up to Nintendo and Retro to start giving us any other significant news to talk about. They're not doing that. They're completely silent. The game is still mysterious. So when these hirings come out, this is what there is to discuss. So the current news is that somebody who was previously working at Sony on the God of War franchise has just been hired by Retro to work on Metroid Prime 4. This is very exciting, just like with previous hirings from DICE or from the Tomb Raider team or from Borderlands, Call of Duty. This is just another high-profile, high-tier individual moving over to the team to work on this game, which is very exciting. Here's a quick snippet and update from NintendoEverything.com about what's happening. In July, Retro Studios added a longtime staffer from Sony Santa Monica, John Marcella, who worked on the most recent God of War games, is now with the Metroid Prime 4 developer as an environment designer. Marcella was a designer on God of War Ascension, having been involved with elements such as game collision. Then, for God of War on PlayStation 4, he was a senior game designer or level designer, and was involved with layouts, AI scripting, navigation sequences, fight spaces, puzzles design, and more. On the whole, Marcella spent over 7 years with Sony Santa Monica. So, very, very cool stuff. Really exciting to imagine someone of his talents and skill set moving over to the Metroid Prime 4 team to work on that game. Now, of course, all we can ever do with this information about new hirings is take what we know this person might have done or worked on before and try to apply those skill sets onto what we think could happen in a Metroid Prime game. That's really the best that we can do because we're not actually at Retro behind the scenes working on this game. But for myself, as somebody who loves the God of War franchise and especially loved the most recent PlayStation 4 God of War, this is amazing. This is really, really crazy. Not just because of the insane visuals of the God of War franchise, but also because of what it says he was working on here. He's working on, what does it say? Puzzle design, which is huge for Metroid. AI scripting, I think the Metroid Prime games could use some improved AI for sure. Navigation sequences, fight spaces, and then layouts. This kind of his overall environmental and architectural design is kind of what I take away from this. He worked on level design for God of War. And of course, every game needs level design. Every game has its own spaces and real estate that you're moving the characters around, including a Metroid game. So of course, somebody who is good at doing that is going to work on every game's team to do that one thing. But here we have somebody who worked on one of the highest profile games ever made moving over to Metroid. I mean, I wasn't the biggest fan of God of War Ascension. I do think it's a little bit better than some people will say, but overall, it was the weakest of all the God of War entries I've ever personally played. But that was still from an era where God of War was doing the classic thing with the static camera, and you're using the Chains of Olympus, and he's like super acrobatic and jumping around and doing all these things. And it was very cool. It was from a different time of God of War that I actually really, really enjoyed, and I wouldn't even be sad if we went back to that in future games. But of course, when we look at the more recent PS4 God of War, that's where things really start to come into focus. Again, we can focus on the graphics and how that game is maybe even the best looking game I've ever seen. Maybe that alongside of The Last of Us Part 2. Probably the best looking video games I've ever seen, purely from a graphical standpoint. But I don't really think that means too much right now, given that he's moving over to Metroid Prime 4, to work on stuff like layouts and AI scripting and fights and level design. He's not working necessarily on the visuals and the graphics. He's working on the overall design. And God of War on PlayStation 4 really surprised me that it wasn't something that was so overly scripted like a Detroit Become Human or an Until Dawn kind of game. It was a pure, tried and true action game. It just happened to feature a different camera style than we're used to from the previous games, and also a different fighting and combat style. And so when you look at how that game was designed in terms of the level and the world, and the puzzle solving was huge in that game, and the incredible combat using the axe and throwing it to come back like Thor's hammer. I mean, there was some amazing groundbreaking stuff happening in that game. And for me, when I take those ideas and I transpose it into a brand new next-gen Nintendo Switch Metroid Prime 4, I get goosebumps thinking about what someone like this could bring to the table. I've said many times how I already predict that Metroid Prime 4 is going to be the best-looking Nintendo-developed game ever created, and I think that when you look at the talent that's already been brought over, people from Tomb Raider and Halo and DICE and Battlefield and all of this stuff, I think that we have enough to understand that that's probably what's going to happen. But the visuals are only one key piece to how Metroid Prime 4 needs to come together, right? Yes, I want the game to be beautiful, but it's got to play well. It has to play in a special way. The Prime trilogy already has a special and unique way that those games play, especially for a first-person genre franchise. But I think Prime 4 needs to take it to the next level, okay? For several reasons, not the least of which being that it's been, as of right now, 13 years since the prior game. By the time Metroid Prime 4 comes out, it could be upwards of 15 or 16 years. I mean, that's kind of the long shot, but we don't know when this game is going to come out. 2021 or 22 or 23. It could feasibly be 15 to 16 years before this game comes out between Prime 4 and Prime 3. A lot has changed in the gaming industry. A lot has changed for Nintendo, the Metroid franchise, for first-person games, for just in general action gameplay. And while I don't want Metroid Prime 4 to be unrecognizable as a Prime game, I do want it to have evolved the formula and the combat to a somewhat significant degree. And I also expect that. So that's kind of the good thing here. It's not just that I want it to do this, I kind of expect that that's what's happening. And it makes me very, very excited at the prospect of this game. Somebody who took action combat gameplay to a different whole new level with God of War on the PlayStation 4 now has the potential chance to do the same thing for the Metroid franchise and for the Metroid Prime series of Metroid games. And I think Prime 4, I've said it countless times in the past, you guys, Nintendo has showed that they will spare no expense and they will do anything they need to make this game a massive hit and to make it amazing, the best Metroid game ever made. To me, that's why they were willing to waste all the money they spent on that first version to scrap that game, fire the old team, and give it back to Retro to start again from ground zero. That was an expensive business move for Nintendo, you guys, but they knew it was the right thing to do, because if the previous Metroid Prime 4 game was going to come out and be just okay, or even just pretty good, I think Nintendo knew that that wasn't enough. They needed something bigger and they needed something better. So they were like, here's millions of more dollars to do this all over again. And now they're bringing in this insane talent. You know that these people aren't cheap. Somebody who worked on God of War and on Halo and on Tomb Raider, three of the biggest franchises in gaming history, that's costing Nintendo a pretty penny, but they know it's worth it, on top of already paying to restart development of the game. So I think that they're going to make sure that this game takes the Metroid Prime formula to whole new heights. Yes, I'm kind of fanboying out a little bit here, but I can't help it. Like, Metroid, you guys know, my favorite franchise in video game history. Metroid Prime, the original, my #1 all-time favorite game. I just turned 40 years old, so I've got almost 40 years of gaming under my belt, and I can tell you my favorite game is Metroid Prime 4. Now, it also should be noted that, as I said in the beginning here, I think God of War is also a spectacular gaming series. Even God of War Ascension, the worst game in my opinion, is still pretty good. The game's like a 7.5 out of 10. Like, that's not a train wreck of a video game. But then you have the best games, God of War 1, 2, and 3, and the PS4 game. I played one of the PSP games too, which was also pretty good, but you look at the main console games, those games are all 9s out of 10s and 10s out of 10s. I think God of War 3 and God of War on PS4, personally, 10 out of 10. God of War 2 is right behind it. I'd probably give it like a 9.5. The point is, it's a great series with an amazing pedigree, and we've got one of the chief level and combat designers from the most recent groundbreaking, award-winning game coming to Metroid Prime 4. It's like marrying two of my favorite foods together to make something just supremely delicious. And I expect Metroid Prime 4 is going to deliver. Obviously, we continue to ask ourselves what these hirings are telling us in terms of timing. Okay, what does this say about where Nintendo and Retro are in the development process of Metroid Prime 4? We don't know. Everyone has a different take on these things, so for me, it's hard to say. Some people will tell you that this is happening because they're still very early in development, meaning this game is really, really far away. Some people will tell you that this is something they do near the end to button things up because the game is close to being done. Other people will tell you that this stuff happens consistently throughout the development of every game, and so it's impossible to know where they are in the development based on this one hiring. And I'm going to be real with you guys, even though I'm obviously not the person to know this information, my guess and my gut tells me that it's the last one. I think that this is just something that happens consistently throughout the several-year development of every big game, and so they could be anywhere in the process, which means for me, I'm sticking to the year target that I've been telling you this whole time, 2022. I still think 22 is the time we're going to see this game. Now, I think there's more than a good shot we see this game next year in 2021. So let's be excited that that could happen. I think we're going to see the game revealed, get a trailer, a tease of gameplay, maybe even a release window announced in 2021. That's fantastic. But while I could be wrong, I really feel like 2022 is the target date for this game. It just makes the most sense. That's a 3-year development cycle from January 2019 when it was restarted, all the way to sometime in 22 when it would release. 3 years to me makes plenty of sense for like a next-gen Nintendo Switch Metroid Prime 4. Even with the hiring of John here from the God of War team over to Retro. Anyway, this is just what I see, man. This is how I break it down. Crazy exciting news. More movement, small as it might be, on the development of Metroid Prime 4, another hiring. I know it's silly to keep talking about hirings, but again, it's all we're getting. It's all Nintendo and Retro are giving us, and they're not even giving it to us. This is other companies and other websites, you know, breaking this stuff down and bringing it to us, you know? I mean, this happened in July, apparently. This is several months old, and we're only just now finding out about it thanks to these reports and these websites. So I don't know. I still see it as exciting. I like talking about the hirings. I like imagining and envisioning in my head what it might mean for the final product of this game, because I'm really hoping that before we're all dead, Metroid Prime 4 releases and just blows us away. Like, I cannot wait, you guys, for this freaking game. Honestly, I just want to see it. Just a trailer and some gameplay is enough to keep me going for the next 5 years, man. So I'm really hoping sometime in like Q1 or Q2 of 2021, we finally get a glimpse of this game to understand what's happening. So that is what I have to say about that. So you've heard my opinions and thoughts and breakdown. I want to hear what you think of my opinions, and then of course your own thoughts and opinions about this news, about Metroid Prime 4. So with that, this video is a wrap. Thanks of course as always for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of 2 Review, and I will catch you next time on another video.